Greetings and welcome. I love iodine with another video in my series on intestinal parasites. This video is going to cover Toxoplasma Gondii. I'll be highlighting some news articles as well as discussing the life cycle of this very common parasite. If you're new to my channel, please take a moment to look at the other topics that I cover relating to intestinal parasites. So we're going to be discussing Toxoplasma Gondii. This is a news article that was put out June of 2016 on CNN's website. And it's titled, How Dangerous Are the Parasites Lurking in Your Cat's Poop? The answer to that question, in my opinion, is that they are very dangerous. It is known that cat feces carries a protozoan parasite called Toxoplasma Gondii. So let's first off define what a protozoan parasite is. Protozoa is a microscopic one-celled organism. Thus, we can't see them with the naked eye. It is also known that these protozoan parasites, they can live in various parts in the body. They can live in the intestines, the blood, and or various organs. The ones that live in the intestines are typically transmitted via the oral or fecal route. And the ones that are in the blood are often transmitted by an arthropod vector like a mosquito. An example of that would be malaria. But we can also get Toxoplasma Gondii from the blood if we are getting a blood transfusion or an organ transplant or from mother to child during pregnancy. So let's go back to the news article. It highlights many things. First thing that's noteworthy is it states, if a woman is infected in the first trimester, it could lead to microcephaly and other birth defects in her child. This is why many doctors should be, if they're not 100%, all telling their female patients that are pregnant or looking to become pregnant to not change the cat litter. It's very, very important not to come into contact with any cat feces. Also, it's noted that this can cause microcephaly. We heard a lot about microcephaly whenever the Zika virus was being reported a lot last year. I want to note that I did not hear many people in the news speaking about Toxoplasma Gondii also causing microcephaly. It is known that wild cats, feral cats, ones that are running, wild stray cats, if you will, they are definitely most likely infected with Toxoplasma Gondii. We'll understand that a little bit more once we go through the life cycle and how this parasite is actually transmitted. This article also goes on to state that between 10 and 15% of people in the United States are believed to be latently infected with the parasite. Latent infection means that it's in a dormant state or it's in an active state. I've also read statistics that 23% of the U.S. population is currently infected with Toxoplasma Gondii. And I've read on the CDC website that approximately 60 million people in the U.S. are infected, which concurs with approximately 23%. This article goes on to also show that there's a link between Toxoplasma Gondii and schizophrenia, as well as other mental health disorders, including bipolar disorder, suicidal tendencies, and aggressive behavior. There's been some debate on that. There's a research study that was put out by a team of British scientists that dispute that. But once we look at the research study and how it was designed, we will see that that study doesn't actually hold much weight, and it's actually not really relevant to making a case against that one way or the other. Anyway, we'll discuss that more whenever I look at the websites in the next section. It's also noted that immune-compromised people may develop neurological problems, including headaches and seizures from the infection. I also want to make a note that this disease can remain in your body for years in a dormant state, and it will wait until you're immune compromised. Maybe you get sick at some point in your life. If you get cancer and you undergo chemotherapy and your immune system is struggling, then Toxoplasma Gondii is opportunistic and it is going to come out and wreak havoc. So if you have it or suspect that you might have it because you've come into contact with it, as you'll see that basically everybody, if I would say 100% of the people is put themselves in a situation where they could have actually contracted this. Not meaning to freak you out, it's just the fact of life once you see how it's transmitted. So a few more things to note. Toxoplasmosis, which is the disease caused by Toxoplasma Gondii, it's been linked to Crohn's disease. Toxoplasma Gondii is easily transmitted from cats to humans. There's also other ways to get it, but from cats to humans is a very common and very easy way to get it. Infections with toxoplasmosis usually cause no noticeable symptoms in adult humans, but that does not mean that your health is not being compromised. So I do want to make a statement. If you have a cat, you are likely infected with Toxoplasma Gondii. So just keep that in mind. But you don't have to have a cat, as we shall see. So this is the CDC website on the life cycle of Toxoplasma Gondii. As we see, the cat is a very key part of this component. So the cat goes to the restroom, and it actually infects the mice and the birds, and it goes into the next stage, and then of course the cats go and eat the mice, the birds, the chickmunks, and the other small mammals, and that actually spreads the life cycle in a circular manner. But also when the cat goes to the restroom in their feces, then that can infect pigs, sheep, and it can infect fruits, vegetables, it can contaminate the water, and then also the litter box is a great place for infections to be transmitted, and it can infect humans either through the food, the water, the litter box, or from the humans actually eating the other mammals like the pork or the sheep and get transmitted that way. There's also cases where blood transfusions actually can transmit this disease as well, but that actually is not as common as we'll see for the other. So anyway, we've all done all of these things. So my recommendation is if you eat sheep, I guess people eat lamb. I don't eat mammals, so I don't really know what you do with a sheep. And if you eat pork, make sure you thoroughly cook it. Also, whenever you're preparing it, make sure that you don't do any cross-contamination. Keep your knives and everything clean, and don't use the same cutting board as you will be using for your other foods, like your fruits and vegetables. Also, if you have a garden and you do any gardening and you have cats that are in your neighborhood or your own cats, and they go to the restroom in the garden, which they like to do, make sure that you wash your hands after you are doing any gardening, any contact with any potentially contaminated soil. And of course, the one thing I did leave off here, which I shouldn't have, is that you can get it from mother to fetus, which we covered already, but I do want to state that here as well. All right. So as we've stated, according to the WHO, it's 50% of the world's population is infected, but there's different statistics. This research article here states that it's 30 to 50%, and the research article that cites this is called Toxoplasmosis, a Global Threat, Correlation of Latent Toxoplasmosis with Specific Disease Burden in a Set of 88 Countries. So that's a very broad study, and it states that it can cause a wide range of health issues, including swollen lymph nodes, cysts, headaches, bowel disorders, and flu-like symptoms. And as we've stated before, that it's been linked to IBD, in particular Crohn's disease. This is a research study that was put up by Cornell University, and it links Toxoplasma and Crohn's to shed light on an autoimmune disease. So it's very important that if you've been diagnosed with IBS or IBD or Crohn's disease, in my opinion, I'm not a doctor, but if it were me, I would make sure that I got tested for Toxoplasma Gondii. There are treatments available, including antibiotics. There's also natural protocols. It has been stated that herbs containing high levels of berberine are effective at that, but you would have to speak with an herbalist or a qualified naturopathic doctor for more information on that. So anyway, if you want to become a Patreon, I do have a Patreon account. Stay tuned. I'll be going right into the next part of the video where I go in and cover some of the websites. So don't tune out yet. There's still another segment where I talk about the research studies and actually show all of the website links that I discussed in this first part of the video. Anyway, I thank you very much in advance, and have a great one, but please stay tuned for the rest of the video. Please leave a comment if you have any questions, and please share this video if you found it to be informative or would help somebody that you know. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to look at a few web pages that are, and websites that are talking about Toxoplasma Gondii. This is from drugs.com, and this is a article talking about the research study that they did in Britain that followed 5,000 children for 18 years in a longitudinal study to determine if cat ownership was linked to mental illness. And according to the results, no, your cat isn't a threat to your mental health. Well, I disagree with that, because this study, whenever we know that Toxoplasma Gondii can remain dormant or inactive for years until you become immune compromised, which usually occurs later in life. Usually we're pretty much at the prime of our life whenever we're a child and whenever we're a teenager. So saying that nothing that, that having a cat didn't result in someone being schizophrenic by the time they were 18 is really not good science. So this, you can read this article in detail, but those are things that you need to look out for when you're reading different research studies that are published, especially whenever people are writing the summaries. It's best to go to the actual research study yourself and read it and be able to look at their methods, how they did it, how they came to their conclusions, what the statistical significance of it is. Whenever you're dealing with 5,000 people as well, I have a degree in research methodology. It does not take much to get a statistically significant result. Now, we have to look at things in real science as a thing. Does it have any practical significance? And again, based on the fact that this research study is flawed, based on the fact that we know that Toxoplasma Gondii does not manifest, especially in people that are healthy, and children and teenagers are probably the most healthy. Usually we get sicker as we get older, as a combination of, age, poor diet, or, hopefully not, and things that we do to ourselves. Most often it is as we grow older that we drink more, we smoke more, we do things that are not necessarily good for our health. We could be eating a lot better than we do, and we get more stressed as time goes on when we're working adults than maybe children and teenagers. So again, keep that in mind when you're reading research studies, and keep a critical eye and out for things of that nature. And plus, this one study just throws away all those years of research studies. That's always a good tale, because true science has to be replicated. If it cannot be, then it's not science. It's either a false study, it's a fraudulent study, or it's just a fluke. And it's, or maybe it's pseudoscience. Who knows? And so keep those things in mind whenever you're looking at research studies, is that one study never proves anything. And also keep in mind that common sense will take you a lot further than a lot of the research that we read. There's one thing I will note, is that with research, that there's a thing they call the foul drawer problem, and that's 70%, they estimate, of the scientific papers and results that they do, the research. If it doesn't get the results that people want, they don't publish it. So that means that the stuff that you're seeing has been cherry picked from the start, okay? Anyway, now we're going to look at Mayo Clinic's webpage on toxoplasmosis. This again just goes into, you can do the back page to get the definition. Of course, we've talked about that toxoplasmosis is a disease caused by the protozoan parasite called Toxoplasma Gondii. And we know it can cause flu-like symptoms in some people. We know that it can cause things like, if you flu-like symptoms, that can include swollen glands, fever, fatigue, body aches, headaches. The exact same symptoms actually I had from getting bit by a tick. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. Of course, your body, a flu-like symptoms, is going to react in pretty much the same way. It's trying to overcome a sickness. Anyway, so what we have here is you can look at the causes. Again, we discussed those: coming into contact with cat feces, eating or drinking contaminated food or water. So be careful with that, especially if you're traveling abroad, because as we're going to look in the next page on Wikipedia, that some countries actually have 95% of the people infected because they have more maybe wild feral cats running around, and maybe poor sanitation is also a consideration and a reason that things actually will increase as far as the prevalence. Using contaminated knives, so if you are someone that eats meat, make sure that you are very, very diligent about using cutting boards specifically for meat and not using it for fruits and vegetables and meat at the same time. And make sure that you're very careful with your knives as well and your other utensils. And make sure that if you're eating lamb and pork, and really, honestly, any mammal meat, you should be thoroughly cooking it. If it is on the rare side or medium rare side, you are at risk for certain pathogens and parasites. E. coli is not one of them, because if you sear the outside, but that's only with ground meat. So a lot of people like myself were under the misconception that, hey, as long as you seared the outside, it didn't matter if it was rare inside. Well, that can't be further from the truth, because you can in fact get different types of worms, and tapeworms being one of them. Okay, so anyway, that was just a side note. Again, eating and washed fruits and vegetables, especially if you're outside in your garden. No matter where you're getting them from, there could have been cats that wandered through the field or through the garden, and if they go into the garden, which they like to do, they like to go to the restroom there because it's like a litter box. And anyway, that can actually cause issues if you're eating those and not washing them. Also, if you're doing any gardening and soil that could be contaminated, which I would consider any soil to be possibly contaminated, make sure you wash your hands after you're done, especially before you eat any food or put your hands in your mouth. And of course, we know the organ transplants and blood transfusions. Now we're going to look at Wikipedia's page on toxoplasmosis. The key things to note here, everything else is pretty much redundant, we've already covered, is that this is where I got the 23% statistic from, where in the United States about 23% are infected. That's a lot. That's nearly 1 in 4. And in some areas of the world, it's up to 95%. So this is a huge thing to be considering, and considering I never really heard too much about it in my entire life until I started studying parasites after becoming infected with fish tapeworm and flukes. This is something that I really want to share information with because I know a lot of people are suffering. I know 2 people in my life that have a lot of cats, and these cats go in and out and have eaten, birds and mice and whatnot, and they have all of these symptoms. And in fact, my one friend, who was one of them, he ended up getting a situation, and I now think that he may have been infected with Toxoplasma Gondii, and that's very tragic because I didn't know this information a year ago when he was sick, and I feel horrible about that because if I would have known this, I could have maybe encouraged him to have his doctor test him for this rather than the route that they went where he expired this past fall. Anyway, and that makes me very sad. So I'm hoping that I can get this information out to somebody that in time, that if they're having any of these issues, it can help them before it's too late. And again, it also states here that a person with a weak immune system could get seizures and poor coordination. And my friend who passed away, who was 90 when he died, but he was healthy up until then, and he did have a cat that he was a little, as he got older, a little lax about the litter box and the things like that, and the cat was in and out. Anyway, his niece has a lot of cats, and she has seizures, and I just wonder if there's a connection there as well. And she has other issues that have been directly linked to it. So anyway, I have encouraged her to get tested, but I think at this point she thinks that what's the point? If you already have it, just go with it, I guess. It's not exactly the way I would do things. Anyway, this is the information from the CDC. This is some facts, and this just talks about where, according to the CDC, 60 million people in the United States may be infected. That is a lot. So keep that in mind. I'm not exactly sure what the population of the world, or of the country is rather. The world is allegedly 7 billion. I think the country is a little over 200 million, 240. So again, that would, be in line with about the 23%. Okay, and here, this is actually the information from the Cornell research study that was done a few years ago. So you can read this and how it was linked and how the common parasite uncovers the key cause of Crohn's disease. This was in the Cornell Chronicle, and it is definitely worth a read if you are someone who has Crohn's disease or knows someone that does, or if you're just interested in learning more about this, because if you encounter this in the future, then you can speak to your doctor and say, I want to get tested for this first before going any further. Sorry, let's get rid of the CNN banner page. I want to go to CNN's because they have a very big flaw on their page. They state that cat scratch fever, aka toxoplasmosis, aka Toxoplasma Gondii, well, they're actually not all the same thing. In fact, they're not the same thing at all. They are so mistaken in this. I'm going to read this, then we're going to talk about it. Toxoplasmosis infects more than 1 million people each year in the United States. Once you get it, you usually got it for life, according to the CDC. It's caused by a parasite we ingest called Toxoplasma Gondii that travels through the walls of our intestine to muscles and major organs and can cause fever and malaise, eye disease, and in immune-compromised individuals, it can kill. An infection during pregnancy can cause miscarriage and severe disease in newborns. There are up to 4,000 cases of mother-to-child transmissions each year. Because cats are a common host, it's often called cat scratch fever. But you actually get it by ingesting the parasite after cleaning a cat box or eating anything contaminated by cat feces, such as food from a home garden where your cat likes to potty. You can also get it from eating raw or undercooked meat. Okay, here's the problem. Cat scratch fever is not caused by Toxoplasma Gondii. It's caused by a bacteria. It's completely different. It's a separate disease, and they should know this. Okay, again, the reason they call it cat scratch fever is because this bacterium that is transmitted is because you get bit or scratched from a cat. So they're completely wrong, and they're saying this. Cat scratch fever, cat scratch disease is not related to Toxoplasma Gondii in any way, shape, or form. The only connection that they have is that they're both diseases that are acquired by coming into contact with cats. Sigh. That's all I have to say on that. I hope that you have a great day. I hope this information was helpful. So again, I wanted to show the CNN article there because it just shows that you really need to check multiple sites, do your own research, because there's many people that read that article now that are going through this idea that cat scratch fever is in fact not just a song by, I believe, Ted Nugent, but is in fact caused by Toxoplasma Gondii, and they are not the same thing. One's caused by a parasite, one is caused by bacteria. Totally different types of infection. Again, of course, you're going to have similar type of things, but again, the treatment would be different, and the transmission is different. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful day. If you have any questions, please leave a comment. I would love to hear from you regarding Toxoplasma Gondii. And all right, thanks.